Never give up. Never give up, and don't give up on yourself. Give this a shot. The simple thing, do not leave before the miracle happens. And this is a journey. It's not a race. Enjoy the friggin' ride. You do not have to live the way you've been living anymore.
That was Tim Ryan, and this is the SHAIR Podcast.
It's time for the SHAIR Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host,
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the SHAIR Podcast. And today we have Tim Ryan joining us on the show, and Tim has an amazing story. He is also the author of From Dope to Hope, A Man in Recovery. And in his book, Tim chronicles his grueling journey into addiction, loss, and recovery. The time he spent in prison, the loved ones he tore apart, the wreckage he left behind, and his miraculous journey into recovery up until today. This is another unbelievable story. Tim should not be alive today. It's only by the grace of God that he is. You do not want to miss this episode. But before we dive into Tim's story, I just want to say thank you to the amazing members of the SHAIR Podcast Private Accountability Group. You guys are awesome. In the past, I have read the iTunes reviews, but today I'm going to read from the Facebook page because I feel compelled to just say thank you for all the amazing kind words, for all the support, for all the love. You guys are absolutely awesome. And what kicked it off was on April 23rd when Rebecca in the Facebook group, who's a new member, she wrote in, "I just love Omar's interview technique. His enthusiastic laughter often has me laughing along because let's face it, we all have some hilarious, tragic tales to tell, and Omar's way of relating to those stories is so refreshing. No judgment or shame, but instead comes the laughter of a good friend who gets it. I think this is my favorite podcast because us addicts and alcoholics are all so incredibly deep, self-deprecatingly witty, batshit crazy, and let's face it, we all tell a great tale. Thanks, Omar, for making me feel normal," whatever that is. And from there, it was just a long list of supporters that came in right after, like Jude and Fred, Alicia, Derek, Catherine, Steve, JC. The list goes on and on. But what really got to me was just how generous you all are with your kindness and with your love. And I need this. You know, whether I want to admit it or not, removing the ego from the equation for a moment because my ego just loves to hear this. You're the greatest, O. You know, of course, every ego wants to hear accolades, but above and beyond the ego, there's a shit ton of work that goes on in producing these podcasts. I'm OCD, I'm a perfectionist. I have to make sure every episode sounds good. Every single one of them is edited, so I do justice to the person who's sharing, to my listeners, and to myself, and to the podcast. It's gaining in popularity. People all over the world are listening. I get reviews on iTunes. You know, recently I was looking, it was Australia, Canada, US, I mean, all over. We have come together in this beautiful family of recovery. And the takeaways that we get from being in the group and listening to the podcasts are all overwhelmingly positive. I read in the Facebook group all the time about people that say, you know, I love O's podcast. After listening to it, I finally went to my first meeting and I love it. And I just got a sponsor. And so my purpose and my plan for this podcast and for recovery was just to be the bridge, to be the conduit, to get people to go to meetings. It saved my life, you know. And again, I'm not promoting any 12-step fellowship, but between the safety and the privacy of the group, I can tell you what worked for me. And when people are out there and they're suffering and they're hurting and they're saying, I can't stop drinking, I can't stop using, I can't stop hurting my family, I don't know what else to do, then it compels me, it behooves me to say, get your ass to a meeting, listen, share, get a sponsor, work the steps. Anyway, I'm so overwhelmed that I just felt like I needed to say thank you to all my listeners. Thank you to all the fans in the Facebook private accountability group, all the people that are in there posting on a daily basis and making themselves available to the addicts still suffering. You guys are awesome. I can't tell you how amazing it feels to see all those beautiful reviews and all the love that I've received and all the love that's given within the group. So let's keep on keeping on. Our purpose here is to help others. That's it. That's our purpose. And if we're able to help the person next to us who's suffering, then it's a win. HP, baby. I love you all. So now let's dive into this incredible story of Tim's. But first, if you have not yet rated and reviewed the SHAIR podcast, please, one of the best ways to help support the show is to go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and that helps catapult us up the ratings on iTunes, which will make it easier for more and more people to find the SHAIR podcast. Now, in the past, many of you have asked, how can I help support the show? Well, I'm going to keep it simple for you. The first way is by donating via PayPal or Bitcoin. And of course, I want to thank all of our listeners who have been generously donating every month to the SHAIR podcast. Make no mistake about it, you guys are making a huge difference. But again, we can always use more. And now you can even send us donations using Bitcoin. So if you go to the website, www.theshairpodcast.com, on the top right corner, there's a donate button. Click on that button and it'll take you to the page where you can donate either by PayPal or by Bitcoin. On a weekly basis, I have over 5,000 listeners every week who listen to the SHAIR podcast. So if 100 of you guys would send me $5 a month or more, there are a few listeners that are sending $10, $20, and even $50 every month, that would completely support the show from beginning to end. So for those of you who have the wherewithal to send me $5, either by PayPal or by Bitcoin, then by all means, please feel free to donate now. We could really use the support. Also, when you're purchasing stuff on Amazon, there are those of you that are still clicking on the Amazon link on the SHAIR podcast website before doing their purchases on Amazon. But again, there are thousands of you listening. If each and every one of you could just remember to go to the SHAIR website, click on the Amazon button before you do your shopping, that is also going to make a tremendous difference for us financially. So I haven't been one to emphasize it in the past, right? But now we've got a solid listener base. I know you guys love the show. I know you guys get a lot out of it. There are those of you, just like in the meetings, that are newcomers. The money's tight. Keep listening. The show will always be for free. The SHAIR podcast private accountability group will always be for free. But for those of you who can, kick in a couple of bucks. Help us out here. And not to forget the SHAIR podcast private accountability group. Again, it's growing like crazy. Guys, go to the SHAIR podcast, www.theshairpodcast. Click on the button that says join the Facebook private group. For those of you that are in the private accountability group, you know how vital and important that has become. There's over 1,500 members in there. If you don't want to go to meetings, if you have problems connecting with people, if you need something more than just the podcasts and are not ready to cross over into meetings or some other structured program, then the private accountability group is perfect for you. Jump in there, make comments, ask questions, or just read the posts. There are so many people out there that have the same questions that you have. All you have to do is just read those and then read all the follow-up answers and responses that come. And make sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter so you know every single time a brand new episode is launched. And of course, if you have any questions, just email me, at theshairpodcast.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So now a quick message from our sponsors, and then on to the show. Would you like to join a free, anonymous online group that offers a daily topic email with popular recovery resources, accompanied by a secret Facebook group for discussion? Then go to dailyaaemails.com for more information about Transitions Daily. And don't forget to share dailyaaemails.com with friends, in meetings, and with sponsees in recovery. Sober Nation is the largest online recovery community and treatment resource center. They provide treatment resources to those struggling with addiction, as well as to the family members who are caught in the crossfire. On top of that, Sober Nation is a huge community of good people who share their experience with each other. They have informative content, recovery and addiction news, as well as an entire clothing line which helps expand the culture of recovery. They can easily be found at www.sobernation.com. Sober Nation is putting recovery on the map. Hey, Tim, thanks for joining us.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, buddy. How about yourself?
Man, I'm every day above ground for me is a true blessing, and I'm blessed again today and honored to be on your show.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay. So, folks, today we have Tim Ryan joining us on the SHAIR podcast. And Tim is the author of From Dope to Hope, A Man in Recovery. Heroin stole more than half of Tim's life away from him. Since he got clean and released from prison, he's dedicated his life to dealing hope to addicts and their families. Known as the Hope Dealer, Tim is a successful entrepreneur and today is a grateful, recovering heroin addict and alcoholic, nationally ranked barefoot water skier, and truth-talking convicted felon. That sound about right, Tim?
That sums it up in a nutshell. That's me to a T. That's me to a T.
All right, awesome. All right, well, let's dive right in then. So first of all, take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery, Tim.
Boy, I don't know what the word normal is, and I never have, but the first thing I do, I get out of bed and I hit my knees. Every morning I hit my knees immediately. I thank the Lord, ask his guidance and direction. I walk outside, have a cup of coffee. Unfortunately, I still smoke cigarettes. I talk to my son, who's an angel flying above, who succumbed to an overdose. We'll get into that. And I go from there because I do a number of things. I work my full-time job. I work for a place called Haven Detox in the recovery team, but then I run a Man in Recovery Foundation. So I deal with a lot of indigent people and people that have state insurance, and I can get them into treatment very quickly. And I have places out of state that our foundation, if we have the funds, will pay for people to get into. I run support groups. I speak all over the country. So I never know where I'm going. I work with a number of police stations where we've started programs where the addicts can walk in and ask for help. I don't have a normal day. But the way my day goes, I usually, Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, I have dedicated 12-step meetings I attend throughout the week. I usually hit another one or two, meet with my sponsor every couple weeks, and then I run support groups and have a batch of kids and a fiance and a former wife and, just do what I do every day. And then at night, I hit my knees and I thank the Lord for another day, and I try to shut my eyes and go to sleep, which I do very well now.
So, Tim, tell us, how much clean time do you have, and when is your anniversary date?
I'm not good at adding. It's about 4 years and 4 months, I think. I actually walked into prison October 30th of 2012, but I brought so much heroin with me, I used November 1st of 2012. So 4 years and 4 or 5 months I have clean and sober.
All right, excellent. And tell us how old you were the first time you drank or used drugs, and more importantly, how did they make you feel?
The first time I tried beer, I was probably 12. I worked the weekends at my dad's buddy's bar and humped up all the cases of beer and the buckets of ice. And I was curious, and I didn't like the taste, but after a can of beer, I liked what it did. But at 14 years old is when I really started drinking. I grew up about a half hour south of the Wisconsin border. The drinking age was 18. So as a freshman in high school, I was going up to Wisconsin drinking every weekend. The first real drunk I had, I threw up, but, I went right back to it, and I liked what it did to me. But I knew I wasn't the guy that went out and had 2 or 3 drinks. I drank to get buzzed and to get drunk.
Right. It's funny how you can identify that right almost from the beginning.
Out of the gate. I wasn't normal, and a party ends at 11 and, all right, let's go. Well, we got to be home. We got curfews. I don't care. I didn't worry about consequences. Oh, I'll get grounded and I'll go out again. And times were different then, that was in 1982. And people weren't getting DUIs. Drinking wasn't scolded on like it is today.
Right. Absolutely. All right, Tim, I think you're all warmed up here, buddy. So here's what we're going to do. It's time for me to turn this show over to you. It's time for you to share your story, the battle with drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally your journey into recovery and your book up until today. So, Tim, take it away.
You got it. I truly appreciate it. I was a kid, and when I talk about it, what I've learned is, I was a kid that struggled with learning disabilities and ADD and dyslexia. And I didn't fit in because I was a kid from 6th grade, 7th grade on that always had tutors. I was the dumb kid, but I was a big kid. I was 6'1". As a freshman, I was 170 pounds. I lived on a lake. The only talent I had was water skiing. I was one of the top-ranked water skiers in the country from 15 to 21. That's all I focused on. Everything else was partying. And at first, it was the weekends. And my best friend was a senior in high school, and I was a freshman. When I became sophomore year, he went to college, and I was trying to fit in. And I can remember I was at a party with two of my friends, Pat and Brian, and Brian's older brother was a senior, and they were all doing cocaine, and we each put in $5 and split a quarter gram of cocaine. And I love what it did to me immediately. Pat and Brian went to Pat's house, and I went up to his brother, and I said, man, do you have any more of that? And he said, well, I've got a half gram. I'll split it with you. Give me $25 on Friday. And I'm like, well, cool. I'll save my lunch money every day and can pay him. Instantly, I was hooked on cocaine. And all through high school, I ran pizza restaurants. School wasn't my deal. I got on the work program. You know, I graduated with a 1.4 grade average. I took the ACT a number of times. I got an 11 every time. I worked, I partied, but it was fun. But I knew, though, you know, I'd get a paycheck for $300 and I would spend it in a day or two. And I knew things were getting out of control, but then I'd quit for a little bit. The drinking never stopped. It progressed, but I wasn't getting consequences. And then I chose to go down to college in Louisiana because there's only two colleges that accepted me, Northeast Louisiana University in Monroe, Louisiana, and Southern Illinois. So my priorities were really in line. I went down to Louisiana because it was 3-to-1 girl to guys. You can hunt and fish. Yeah, they had the best intercollegiate water ski team in the country, and the drinking age was 18. Bam, I'm going to Louisiana. Yeah, you know, I really had my priorities in line. And I remember my mom and I flew down there, and I couldn't wait for her to leave. And as soon as she took the rental car to the airport, I was at the liquor store. I had a 12-pack of beer, a 6-pack of Bartles and James wine coolers, and a fifth of Jim Beam, and I was drunk within 2 hours. But in Louisiana, I've got the gift of gab. I met people very quickly, and it was some great experiences. I moved in with a buddy of mine and his dad on a bayou, and we hunted and we fished and we ran trot lines. But I also got into doing acid for the first time, doing magic mushrooms. We could pick them, and what was big then was ecstasy. In 1985, ecstasy was legal in the state of Texas. They sold it in bars. They made it illegal, and there was a lot around, so we started driving to Mississippi to pick up money to go to Dallas or Houston. We'd go buy 10,000 hits for $1 a piece, come back and sell them for $7, $10, $15, pay the guy back that fronted the money, and just, it was a constant party. The water ski team I went to get on, I never made it. Class wasn't something for me, and things got out of control very, very quickly. And, you know, it even talks about it in my book. There was one beautiful girl, Miriam, a Southern belle from Vicksburg, Mississippi, and straight as a lace, big Christian, and she wanted me to go to church with her on a Wednesday night. She wanted to go to dinner and go to church, and of course I didn't go. And the next morning she shows up at my house crying, and she's like, Tim, why wouldn't you go on a date with me? And I said, well, Miriam, I told you Freddie's bar has $5 all you could drink. I mean, that's the way I thought, but it took me until I was ultimately incarcerated to go, you know what? I think about her all the time, but those things were not a priority. Right. God, higher, none of that stuff was. And fast forward, I ultimately dropped out of college. I did 3 years and just wasted time, partied. I had fun, but consequences were coming in. I had tried crystal methamphetamine once. I didn't like that. Did a lot of cocaine, spent all my money, had to work at a place called TJ Cinnamon Buns, making cinnamon buns for $2.25 an hour and being sure I could burn a batch every night to take them home and eat them because all my money went to drugs and alcohol. That was everything. I can remember leaving Louisiana. I had a 78 Ford Fairmont, and I did one more drug run, and I'm driving back with, 20 hits X on me, and I'd been up for 3 days. And I rolled my car in Tennessee on a median, and the damn thing landed on its tires, and I drove into a rest area, and I slept but that was just normal to me.
What?
I laughed it off. Yeah.
No.
I swear, that's just the way I operated. And consequences still really weren't happening. And I came home and started working at a stereo store and selling equipment. And I really started getting back into cocaine. And I was introduced to a gentleman that was 20 years older than me. And I had tried smoking cocaine in college, but Roger and I started smoking a lot of cocaine, and he had the Colombian hookup in Chicago, and we'd go to Chicago every day. We'd go into a Catholic church. We'd kneel down like we were praying, and this Colombian lady would hand us a newspaper with an ounce of cocaine. We'd drive back. We'd sell half of it and smoke the other half. And very quickly, I mean, I'm stealing checks from my mom, from my brother, and one of my friends at a gas station that he owned, I'd cash checks there, called my mom and said, Mrs. Ryan, you need to know Tim's strung out on cocaine. He has one of Dan's checks he's trying to cash. And the cat was out of the bag. And in hindsight, the week prior, I had called a drug treatment center because I knew I needed help, but I didn't know what to do. And I was afraid to tell anyone. I was afraid to put my hand up, and ask for help. So I went to this drug treatment center, and at the time it was 1990. I had just turned 21, and I sat in there, and they had me in group, and they're trying to run my parents' insurance and couldn't get a hold of them, and I got $400 in my pocket. I'm like, I think I'll come back next week. And so I walked out. Things hit the fan, and I ended up going back a week later and had my little brother drive me, and I bought a case of beer and drank 8 beers, and here, Kevin, here's your beer, and he was a couple years younger than me. And when I went into treatment, I truly went in with the thought pattern that I just want to quit doing drugs and figure out how to drink like a normal person. I also had an opportunity. My best friend was playing pro hockey for Team Austria, and he wanted me to move to Austria with him in Zell am See at the base of this hill. And I knew if I'd go to Zell am See that I'd probably destroy my friend's hockey career because my life was so out of control. So I went to treatment, and I liked treatment a lot. It was February 2nd in 1990. It was my parents' wedding anniversary, and a speaker came in and spoke and shared his story. And when he was done, he looked at all 30. We had 38 clients. And he looked at us and he said, one of you will be sober in a year.
Wow.
And I put my hand up right away, and I said, excuse me, sir, one of us? He said, listen to me, kid, one of you will be sober and a third of you will be dead. And I said, what do I do? And he said, don't drink and go to those 12-step meetings. So that's exactly what I did. And when I got out, my father sat me down, and at the time he was senior vice president at E.F. Hutton. He was running the whole country. He had spent 26 years there. And he said, look, Tim, where did I go wrong as a parent? What did mom and I do wrong? And I said, you didn't. You adopted 4 kids. We were poor. You made money. We went on vacations. You were at every sporting activity. You bought me a ski boat. You're the greatest parents in the world. And he said, oh, I know that. And right away, I'm like, where's he going with this? And he said, Tim, while you were getting treatment, your mother and I were getting some too, and we were introduced to Al-Anon. And I'm like, what's Al-Anon? And he said, we learned that we didn't cause your disease, we can't cure it, and we can't control it, and I'm not going to contribute to it. So he said, the deal is you're ready to come home. You better do your meetings. The day you start drinking or doing drugs, you're out of the house. I said, deal. So I got home and started going to the Crystal Lake Alano Club, and I'd go to meetings 5 times a day. And I love going to meetings. But I'd be the guy at 21. Now, this is 1990. There still wasn't a lot of 21-year-olds that in my area that were getting into recovery. So I'd put my hand up and say, I'm looking for a sponsor, and nobody would say anything. And I'd be like, yes, I got away with it again. And, everything to me was a con, and I'm getting away with it. And I met a guy there that was selling his residential seal coating unit, an asphalt seal coating business. So my mom walked me into the bank. I borrowed $10,000 and started Ryan Seal Coat Specialist. And I had a barefoot water ski school on the Fox River with my partner. And next thing, I got 8 of my buddies working for me. And I'm trying to tell everyone else they're drunk and I'm great and life is good. But I never got a sponsor. I never worked the steps. And about 6 months into meetings, I remember this big guy comes up to me and he said, you, my friend, are the stupidest person I've ever met. I said, what are you talking about? He said, kid, no one's going to come up and be your sponsor. You got to ask somebody. Oh, really? That's how this program works? And instead of doing that, I got a resentment and I quit going to meetings. You know, I was friggin' cured, and I had a business in this. And about 2 months later, I went to a Grateful Dead concert, and all bets were off. Poster and a fatty, $7. I bought that poster because it was really cool. I smoked that one joint. Within 2 days, I was back to drinking and doing cocaine. 3 months later, I buried my business. My partner with the water ski school said, Tim, you're out of control. I'm going down to Florida, and, you know, wish you the best of luck. So the first apartment I moved into, I didn't realize you actually had to pay rent and pay bills, and the power gets shut off, and I'm getting evicted. So you know what? I'll just move. I'll get away from all my problems. And I moved down to Austin, Texas with my best friend at the time, Trayson. And Trayson's backstory was his parents were married for a couple years. They got divorced. When he was 9, him and his mom got in a car wreck. His mom got killed. His dad basically abandoned him. So her mom and dad raised him. And his grandfather was one of the top gynecologists in the world. So he went to private schools and this. Then they died, and we're supposed to leave him a substantial amount of money, millions of dollars. And when he turned 21, turns out his uncle lost it all in the oil fields, and he got 75 grand. So Trayson bought a little house and started a business, and he said, TR, come on down, live with me. I'll sober you up. And for about 3 weeks, I started going to the Bolden group and going to meetings, and I'm sitting there, and I wanted to get high, and I flipped on the news, and I saw that someone was just shot on 13th Street. So I borrowed Trayson's truck, and I drove to 13th Street because I know if they're shooting people, they're selling drugs. And I started smoking cocaine again, and I pulled some credit card fraud on my friend, and he found out and kicked me out and had me arrested. And next thing, I'm sitting in Travis County Jail for a month going, all right, this isn't working out too well.
No.
And it turns out the state's attorney used to babysit me, so my mom pulled some strings, got me out of jail, and I went to meetings, and I met some guys marketing cable television that were sober. So we instantly hightailed it to Michigan, and I'm with these 6 guys that are sober, selling cable. We're making some good money, and then we're in Buffalo, New York for 3 months, and then Colorado. So I'm getting paid to sell cable all over the country, and we're staying sober and going to meetings, but again, I'm not working a program. And about a year later, I got an opportunity to go back to Buffalo, New York and start my own company. And I did. And a gentleman that had worked for me, his ex-wife lived there. I'd met her twice. I called her, showed up with a bottle of Captain Morgan, and never left. And I started TR Enterprises International Limited. I always worked hard, and I knew how to market and I knew how to sell. I just didn't know how to manage money or manage my life. And when I talk about money, I'm not talking about it to brag. It's just how chaotic my life was. Within 6 months, I had 60 people working for me nationwide. I had the 3rd largest marketing company in the country, and I was making about $20,000 to $25,000 a week.
Wow.
And what do you think I did? I went right back to doing cocaine.
Yeah.
And I was a big shot. I met this guy prime time, and I'd give him $20,000 cash a month and say, you bring an ounce of cocaine to my house every day. And believe me, like clockwork, at 7 a.m., he was there. And I very quickly buried that business. And what do? I come back to Crystal Lake, Illinois, and Mom and Dad let me in, and, you know, I'm 24. I owe the IRS $80,000. I'm 250 grand in the hole. And so I go back to meetings, and I met a guy that was a technology recruiter, and he was 7 years sober, and Bob gave me a shot. And at the time, it was called a data processing recruiter. And I just banged cold calls all day. And my first month, I made $9 grand. 5 months later, I made $50,000. And of course, I went right back to drinking and doing drugs. But I put myself in situations where I was needed, not wanted. Because if I made 50 grand, Bob made 50 grand. So I did what I wanted. I drank, I did drugs, and he kept me around. And then I had the opportunity to go work for a management consulting firm. And I got in as their head recruiter, and 6 months in, I'm the director of recruiting. I got the new Ski-Natique. I got the new Harley. I've got the custom Jeep. My life is good, but my thinking was, there's a Bennigan's restaurant in the building, so I would interview people there, someone at noon, at 2, at 4, at 6, because I could drink all day and interview people and have cocaine delivered. But very quickly, I'm the third highest paid guy in a $50 million firm, making well into the 6 figures. And my ego really kicked in because, again, I'm the guy with the 1.4 grade average that got the 11 on his ACT, and everyone I'm hiring has, bachelor's and MBAs or PhDs from Cal Poly, Berkeley, Harvard, Yale, MIT, University of Chicago, Northwestern, Brown, the best of the best. And I'd met my future wife there, and Shannon was a receptionist. We started dating, and I can remember the first date I took her on. We went to Bennigan's because I like to drink there, and me and another recruiter, Vic, took her down there. It was kind of a funny story because I walk into work one day, and there's a new lady in a peach outfit at the front desk, and I said, "Hey, Peachy, how are you?" She said, "I'm good." I said, "Who are you?" She said, "Well, I'm Shannon, the new receptionist." She goes, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Tim Ryan, the director of recruiting." She goes, "Oh, you're the jerk that didn't want to hire me." I go, "What?" Yeah. Word for word. I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Didn't Bill give you my resume a month ago? Weren't you looking to hire an assistant?" I said, "You're the banker lady, aren't you?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't like bankers. I never called you." And that's the way I would take a commission check for 20 grand and go to the currency exchange and cash it, because at that time I didn't want to wait 5 to 7 days for my check to clear, and they didn't have direct deposit, and I could pay my drug dealer every week. That's just, I thought I was a big shot, walking around with money, and, I worked hard. If the boss was in at 6:30 in the morning, I was in at 6. If he left at 7 at night, I left at 7:30, and he thought I walked on water, but, I would sleep 3 hours a night, but at 2, 3 in the morning, I'm the guy with myself, by myself, crying to myself, wondering why I can't stop doing this. But again, I couldn't put my hand up. So I thought Shannon would save me. And I took her down with another recruiter, and we had a few drinks, and she went to the bathroom, and Vic's like, "I got this." I said, "No, I'm going to get this girl here." And she came out of the bathroom, and I gave her a kiss. And I said, "Shannon, I'd like you to be my new girlfriend." And I swear to God. And she said, "I'd like that, but I have one question to ask you, Tim." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Do you do drugs?" I said, "God, no, I don't do drugs. Why would you ask me a stupid question like that?" She said, "Well, I've got a 3-year-old son by the name of Nicholas who has a deadbeat dad who's a drug addict, and I want nothing to do with the drug addict." And I said, "I don't do drugs." And she said, "Good, let's go on another date." She went home to Naperville. I went to Chicago and bought a 1/4 ounce cocaine.
Man.
And that's how I operated. And we would hang out, and Nick was all around, and I was adopted, so I took Nick in, and 5 months later, the pill didn't work, and she's pregnant with Max. So I took her down to the courthouse and married her. But prior to doing that, I quit my double, my $200,000+ a year job because the manager had pissed me off, and I told him to kick rocks with no shoes, and I'll start my own company. And I went from making, $250,000 a year to taking a $40,000 base salary job. Another learning lesson. So we're living in this little apartment. I take her to the courthouse. I marry her. I adopt Nick. We have Max. I'm making more money. We move into a townhouse. 9 months after Max is born, she's pregnant with Tanner. 9 months after Tanner was born, she was pregnant with Abby. The one thing, I was good at was making babies. Taking care of them is a whole nother concept.
Oh, dude, you're like a machine, dude.
It was crazy. It was crazy. But what got me to quit doing the cocaine, and you got to understand, in my addiction, man, everything was about me. And, we had a nice townhouse. I was making a good living. I started my first executive search firm in 98, 99. We're making a ton of money because it's before the dot-com bust. And I disappeared for 2-3 days in the Cabrini Green project, smoke and crack, and come home. And I had woke up one day, and Max was 14 months old, and he was crawling into my home office. And I picked him up, and I put him in his room, and I opened my office door. What was all over the floor?
Coke.
Cocaine.
Yeah.
Coke. lots of it. If my son would have picked up one of those rocks, it would have killed him.
Oh,
so immediately it put the fear of God in me, and I started going back to those 12-step meetings. And this time I kind of got a sponsor. I kind of did a 4-step. I kind of got into a 5th, and I was cured as usual because I like to be my own God and sponsor myself. And, of course, I thought I'm the guy that I thought if I go to enough meetings, I'll get sober through osmosis. Yeah, kind of delusional. But the market tanked. I started another consulting firm with my old boss, making good money. Shannon and I are building a house out in Oswego, Illinois. I'm building her a dream house. And I'm a little bit over a year sober, and I'd met a guy at the L&O Club that had asked me to take him to Chicago to move out of his apartment. So I take Joel to Chicago. We're moving him out. And out of the bedroom, his roommate, Sava, pops. What are you doing? I said, I'm moving out your roommate. What are you doing? He said, I'm doing heroin. You want to do some? Okay. That's how quick it was.
Oh,
that quick.
Wow.
I said, and I was over a year sober, but I wasn't working a program. I didn't have the coping skills. Hold on, I should call someone. No, I shouldn't put my hand on a hot flame. And I tried that one bag of heroin, and that was it. That's what I had been looking for this entire time. And I don't ever glamorize drug use or alcoholism because it absolutely destroyed my world. But at that time, my mind frame, that was it. So I started doing heroin. And for a year, I would go to Chicago and interview clients and go to my drug dealers. And Ray was the 3rd highest guy in the Maniac Latin Disciples. So I'm the only white guy going into this Puerto Rican neighborhood, let alone going into this man's house. I know his wife, his kids, but I spent a lot of money. Shannon had no clue. But what she did start noticing was Dad would get sick every 3 weeks. And she's researching the internet. What kind of disease does my husband have? And instantaneously, he's cured. Well, I was dope sick, and someone would bring me a bag of heroin, and I was fine. So I called Ray one day, and I said, I need to get off this stuff. And he said, go to the methadone clinic. So that's exactly what I did, and I got on methadone. And I remember asking the doctor, is this addictive? And, oh, absolutely not. You can get off any time. And that's when I told Shannon what was up. So about 4 months into the methadone, I'm at about 85 milligrams. We're at our new house, and I'd stepped on a Spider-Man toy. We're having Max's 7th or 8th birthday, and I just go ballistic. And she said, Tim, you have got to get off this stuff. So what did I do? I called Ray, and he said, you got to get back on heroin. She gave me $400 and said, go. I'd rather see you on heroin than on this methadone. And then it just got, yeah.
Wow.
Then I tried. Yeah, it was bad. And then it's like I wanted to get off, but I didn't know how because I didn't like getting dope sick. So then I was introduced to Suboxone in 2002. And at that time, there was a doctor in the Wrigley Building in Chicago that I would see once a week, and he would prescribe me 7 pills, and I'd have to pay him $500 cash. What I ultimately did was use the Suboxone to keep around so if I didn't get dope sick. And it just started whirlwind, and I got a second DUI. I lost my license for 3 years. I was working. We took this company from $800,000 to $12 million in a year and a half. I'm making a ton of money. I'm working out of my house, so people didn't know what I was doing. The kids are getting older, and I also ran the Cub Scout. I was an assistant pack master. I ran the Cub Scouts for 7 years. I did all these things. Nobody knew I was doing heroin but Shannon. And I started, she's looking at it as, I've got 4 kids now. They're all young. I'm stuck with this guy. And what do I do? And then I got my first driving on revoke in 2005. Then I got my second. Then I got my third. Then I got my fourth. Actually, in hindsight, I got my second one, and every time I was going to get heroin. I got my second one in Chicago by a gentleman by the name of Officer White. And he told me, you better quit driving. They're going to put you in prison. 8 months later, I got pulled over in Chicago in a different vehicle by Officer White. Who gets pulled over by the same Chicago cop 8 months apart in 2 different cars? I do.
Seriously. Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, but in hindsight, that was a God moment. That was God throwing me a life raft, and
Yes.
I didn't grab on.
Yes.
So that got me my first year in prison. Back then, You did 61 days and they released you. We had to tell my 4 kids that I was going to India on business because I was in the technology space. So my kids thought I was in India. But I can remember being in Stateville prison prior to getting shipped down to Vienna, and my beautiful daughter, Abby, turned 6 to 7, and I was in a cell all day, and I couldn't call her. And Max turned 10 to 11 or 11 to 12, and I couldn't call him. And when I got down to the prison and I'd call home on caller ID, it would come up prison, and my wife would answer the phone and say, oh, your dad's calling from the prison hotel in India. Would you like to talk to him?
Wow.
So my kids, I called them every day, but they thought Dad was calling from India. So I turned my wife into my biggest enabler and the biggest liar to cover up for this dirty little secret we had. I got out of prison, and I remember my wife sitting me down, and she said, Tim, I'm going to nursing school. And I said, Shannon, you don't need to work. I make plenty of money. And she said, well, while you were in prison, I applied for a Dunham scholarship, and I was selected number 1, and I have a full ride. And I'm going because the way you're living, you're going to end up in 2 places. You're going to end up dead, or you're going to end up back in prison. And we got 4 kids, and I need to be able to take care of them. And that lady was right, because I had overdosed and had some overdoses. And, 3 weeks later, I started another executive search firm and went right back to doing heroin. And that first year, I made almost $400,000, and I had an office in the Wrigley building, and my day would consist of getting up, shooting heroin, drinking vodka, go down, order up 5 grams of heroin, meet my dealer at my office, go to my office, shoot dope. I'd sit down at the Billy Goat Tavern from about 10 till 2 every day, have 10, 15 martinis, go back up, shoot dope, occasionally make a call, because in the line of work I was in, I could make a placement, make $30,000. So that would keep me afloat for another month or 2. So I didn't work that hard. Things were imploding. And the sad fact of the matter is I have a beautiful 5-bedroom house in the suburb with a wife and 4 kids, but I'd usually spend 1 or 2 nights a week under Lower Wacker Drive with the homeless people because that's where I was more comfortable. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. December 16th of 2010, and I was also, my oldest son, Nick, he's about 15, 16 now, and he doesn't know I'm doing heroin, but I wasn't a father to Nick. I was a friend. I was a cool dad. I was a dad that would let Nick and his buddies smoke weed or drink beer in the basement, occasionally trip on acid, and, I was a cool dad. In hindsight, it was a huge mistake, but I was lost to my addiction. I don't make an excuse for it, but in the end of my story, you'll see what ultimately happened with that. But anyhow, December 16th of 2010, the next day, Shannon was having all the people come over for nursing school for a big party. And while she's taking a shower, I went and sold the money out of her coat, snuck the van out, and I drove to Chicago one more time. Got to my dealers, and they said, Tim, be careful. We got a new batch. It's strong. So I snorted a little bit, and I pulled away and pulled into a McDonald's. I shot up a bunch of dope, and I sat there and said, well, I'm not dead. And I started driving, and next thing I remember, I'm being wheeled into West Suburban Hospital with the cop yelling at me, you junkie, a bunch of vulgar words. You just killed 2 people. Oh. See, I had overdosed while driving and hit 2 cars. Oh. It turns out I didn't kill anyone, but for 5 hours I thought I did. This cop's freaking out on me. So I said, look, I don't have insurance. Get me out of here. Go book me. And when they got me to the police station, the other officer was kind enough to come in, and he said, look, I'm sorry about my partner, but he just lost his brother to a heroin overdose, and he doesn't like you people. I'm like, oh, okay. He said, you didn't kill anyone, but you did put 4 people in the hospital, one being a 9-month-old baby. He said, you're in a lot of trouble. So, I got back into Cook County Jail, spent a week in there, manipulated my mom to put up the money to bail me out on December 23rd of 2010, 2 days before Christmas. Shannon once again picks me up at 2 in the morning at 26 in California. We drive home in dead silence. We pull into the garage, go into my office, and I said, look, honey, I'm really sorry. And she said, Tim, you're sorryed out. I don't want to hear your sorries anymore. She said, we'll talk in the morning. And I said, do you know where my glasses are? Because the airbag went off. She said, yeah, I went and got your glasses out of the car, and your coat was in there. It's in the closet. And she said, oh, by the way, you didn't know all the kids' Christmas presents were hidden in the back of the van, and half of them are missing. Great job, Father of the Year. And I'm like, great. So she went up to bed, and I went into the closet and opened up my coat pocket, and there was all my heroin. So I went right back to shooting dope.
Oh, man.
Because that's what addicts do. And I remember Christmas Day having to take a cab down to Chicago to buy more dope. And that's just the way I operated. And now I know I'm going back to prison. And so I went and bought the best lawyer, gave him $30,000 and said, let's beat this. And about 3 months into fighting my case, now all my kids know Dad's a heroin addict. Nick's 17, Max is 15, 14, Tanner's 11, 12, but all my kids knew. And I was honest and told them and blah, blah, blah. Well, about 3 months in, I'm really dope sick one day, and I'm taking a hot bath, and my 17-year-old son walks in the bathroom. He said, what's wrong, Pops? And I said, what do you think, you idiot? I'm dope sick. And he looks at me and he said, not anymore, Dad. Today's your lucky day. And Nick left 2 bags of heroin on the counter, and I got out of the tub and I snorted them. And I went in his room and I said, Nick, what the hell are you doing? Oh, don't worry, Dad, I'm just selling a little bit. And I looked right at him. I said, Nick, you know what this drug has done to me. And he looks right at me and he said, Dad, you're a successful drug addict. And I said, why would you say that? Well, you got a nice house, you got an office in the Wrigley building, you make a good living. See, in my son's delusional eyes, he thought because I functioned, I was successful. He didn't realize the war I was fighting every day. And in hindsight, 3 months after that, Nick and I were doing heroin together. He started doing it. I started doing it more. And that's how my son and I ultimately bonded until I finally was sentenced to prison. I fought my case for 21 months. You know, I'm the type of guy that when my wife graduated nursing school after 3 years top of her class, I'm the guy that didn't even show up to her graduation because I was dope sick. Yeah. I'm the guy that went to make coffee one morning and the cups were dirty, and I went to the other cabinet, I grabbed a coffee cup and I heard something in it, and it was my wife's wedding ring, and I went right to the pawn shop and pawned it, and then I helped her look for it for 3 weeks, and I blamed it on my son, Nick. That's the type of guy I was. Ultimately, October 30th of 2012, Judge Wattis down at 26 in California sentenced me to 7 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. He wanted to give me 12 to 15, but I guess that's what that lawyer got me. And the way they ran the case, I got 3 for my 3rd DUI, 3 for my driving on revoke, my 5th driving on revoke, and 1 for the spoon and syringe. They charged me with 0.1% of 1% and 1 gram of heroin, so I got a year for possession of drugs. But in Illinois, you only do the top number. So I've got to do 3 years. You do it at 50%. I'm going to have to do a year and a half. And all right, cool. I got to do a year and a half in prison. When I walked into Stateville holding, Northern Illinois Receiving Center the second time, when I walked in, I weighed 158 pounds. Now I'm 6'1". Today I'm 200 pounds. I was skin and bones. I was walking death. I had a $500 a day heroin habit. I was drinking between, a fifth to a gallon of vodka a day. I wanted to die, but I was too much of a chicken to put a gun and blow my head off. And I defecated and vomited myself for 2 weeks straight. I didn't sleep for at least 30 days, not a wink. And about 2 weeks in is when I looked up and I said, God, higher power, Fred, Allah, Buddha, whatever's up there, please take away this obsession and compulsion to use. And I swear I will turn my will and life over to you. And let me get into Sheridan Correctional Center. And damn it, the next day there was a bag in front of my cell, and I think it was number 23, Tim Ryan, and I was getting transferred, and I got transferred to Sheridan Correctional Center, which in Illinois, there's 2 drug treatment programs out of 28 prisons, and I got into one, and one that was 45 minutes from my home. When I got into prison, I was probably the happiest person to walk through those prison gates because I knew, I swear to God I was. I knew it was over. I was 44 when I walked into prison. I left my wife with nothing. And here's the type of guy I was. 6 weeks prior to me going to prison, I received a commission check for $20,000. And I was going to spend $5,000 on drugs and give my wife $15,000. I spent all $20,000 in 6 weeks. And I didn't leave her with the dime. But I knew once I walked in there, I'm going to take this time and I'm going to use it. And God moments started happening, but the ultimate God moment was that you do 30 days in one building, 30 in another. And I finally got into one of the little buildings, and I walk into my cell, and there's this big black guy sitting on the bunk. And he looks up at me, and I said, "Hey, man, how you doing? I'm Tim." And he's holding a big book. And he looks up at me, he says, "Hey, Whitey, you into recovery?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Because if not, you are not coming in this cell, brother, because that's all we do in here." I said, "I'm into recovery." So, "Well, good, I'm Big Perk. Nice to meet you." I said, "I'm Tim. Nice to meet you, Big Perk." He says, "I think I'll call you Powder." I said, "You can call me whatever you want." Yeah, true story. Big Perk was, he was a gang chief for the Unknown Vice Lords in Chicago on the West Side for 25 years. He had done 10 bits in prison. He was a ruthless individual, and the man became one of my best friends and helped save my life. 18 hours a day in that cell. We never got a TV. We studied the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the NA Basic Texts, the Bible. We were at the library every 2 weeks, and I would read every Tony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, business, you name it, I read it. Cosmic healing, karmic energy, spirituality. I wanted to change. We did group 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. At the day room at night, Big Perk and I would sit on a bench with the big book and have a meeting. And people, "Come on, let's do push-ups for noodles." Or, "No, man, I'm here to change." And I had to shift my thinking. When I was in prison, I had no expectations. I never expected to get a visit. I never expected to call home and someone answer, and I surely never expected to get a letter. So when I got a letter, it was a blessing. When I called home, and every time I called home, Shannon picked up that phone, or the kids picked up the phone, it was a blessing. And Shannon brought 2 of our kids to visit me every 2 weeks. So I watched the corn grow, get cut down, grow again, and I didn't let the time do me. I did the time to benefit myself. But those visits and all that, and my parents came a couple times, and a few friends, and the letters, that's what did it for me. Father's Day of 2013, I called my wife. Now, in the interim, we had lost our house in foreclosure, so I displaced my wife and family. They had to move out of the house. Of course, my dad's in prison. You know, my addiction cost my family more than me. I'm the guy sitting there on 3 hots in a cot while my wife's having to figure out where and how she's going to move things out. She's just graduated nursing school. But anyhow, they moved into her mom's townhouse, a 2-bedroom townhouse. So the 3 boys were in the basement, and Abby and my daughter and Shannon shared a room, and my mother-in-law, Mary, had her room. But I'd called on Father's Day, and I said, "Hey, you bringing the kids to visit?" She said, "Yeah, but Tim, I got to let you know something. I sent you a package." I'm like, "Great, what did you send me? Some magazines?" She said, "Tim, I sent you divorce papers." She said, "I can't do it anymore." And you want to talk about a kick, you know, I had about 8 months before I got out, and it was a reality check. But in hindsight, I'm glad she did it then, because I had the time to process it, to grieve, to work on it. And one of my other fears was my oldest son, Nick, was still in active addiction, and I thought my son was going to die while I was in addiction, because he's overdosed and overdosed. And I mean, in hindsight, I'm the guy, I've overdosed 8 times. I've been clinically dead 3. I've had 2 mild heart attacks. I shouldn't be talking to you right now, but God, higher power, Fred, Buddha, whatever, has other plans.
Right.
You know, God to me was G-O-D, a gift of desperation. I was desperate enough in that holding cell to want to change. And I knew I was going to change. So when I ultimately walked out of prison, and God's got a funny sense of humor, I caught my case December 16th of 2010. I walked out of prison December 16th of 2013. 3 years to the day I got arrested, I walked out of prison. And when I walked out, my head was high, and there was my ex-wife, who stole my dear friend, to pick me up. And Shannon picked me up and drove me to downtown Naperville, where I still reside today, and had a 2-bedroom townhouse set up for me with all our furniture. My mom had helped me out with rent for a few months, and she brought all 4 of our kids over that night. We had Portillo's Italian beefs, and that was the last time my family was together as a family, because my oldest son, Nick, was back out using. I went back in the technology space for 3 months, didn't want to do it. And the main thing I did when I got out of prison, 4 days later, my parole agent showed up. I was at the 5 o'clock Alano Club meeting. I got another sponsor. He took me through the steps again. Perk and I did them a number of times in prison, and recovery became number one in my life. When I would go to work for this technology company, I commuted 4.5 hours a day, 2 hours and 15 minutes one way by 2 trains and a cab, and 2 hours and 15 minutes back by 2 trains and a cab. But I was back every night for the 8 o'clock meeting. Recovery was number one. I still do the same Saturday morning meeting, the same Sunday morning meeting. And then I wanted to set up my foundation. I had started a support group. It was originally an HA meeting, a Heroin Anonymous meeting, and about 2 weeks in, I had a kid come up and say, well, hey, I'm on benzos, and I hear you're different. Can I come to your meeting? And I said, sure. 2 weeks after that, I had a mother show up with their daughter and say, I hear you're a little different, and you're kind of in your face. Can I sit in on the meeting? And I had an epiphany. I said, why don't I have the parents come with the addict at the same time, and I'll just call it an addiction support group. I don't care who comes. And the group started, and I got a clinical friend of mine that we had met through the past year. She would run the family side. I'd run the addicts. And I told them, look, I don't care what you do to get sober. 12-step, Christian-based, refuge recovery, smart, sing kumbaya, but you better change every aspect of your life. And at times, there would be standing room only. I would have 120 parents, and I'd have 40 or 50 addicts. And then I started 5 more of these. And then I set up my foundation, a Man in Recovery Foundation. My motto is we take people from dope to hope, helping one addict at a time. And I started maneuvering the system because, like in Illinois, if you have state insurance, it's a 12 to 18 week wait to get into treatment. People are dying. I can get somebody in within 24 hours. And that started going. I thought I'd, raise a bunch of money and pay myself 40 grand a year and save the world. And I was mistaken. At 19 months sober, my son Nicholas was 20 now. He was back in treatment for the 6th time. So I went and met with Nick. He's like, Dad, we'll go speak in high schools. We got a crazy story. I said, Nick, we can do all this, but damn it, grasp recovery. He got out. 30 days later, he's back in Cook County Jail selling bogus pills, trying to buy heroin. He did 30 days there. I talked to him every day. He got transferred to another county jail for 15 days. He got out, and his mom picked him up and took him to lunch and said, Nick, we're done. You're not coming to my house, and you're not coming to Dad's because all you do is lie, cheat, and steal. Oh, I got it figured out, blah, blah, blah. 5 days out of jail, I called Nick, and I said, hey, Nick, why don't you come to my house and get some Narcan? Because I started distributing Narcan prior to anyone else doing it. And he's like, Dad, don't worry, I'm not on that anymore, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, Shannon called me and said, Nick overdosed, I'm coming to get you. So she picked me up at 6:30 in the morning. We drove to the wrong hospital, to Good Sam. Then we got over to Hinsdale Hospital, ran into the emergency room. Tim and Shannon ran here to see our son Nick. He overdosed. Whether it was 30 seconds or a minute later, a female chaplain walked out. No. I instantly knew the cards were up. They took us in a back room. The doctor came in the white coat, and he said, do you know your son was struggling? Yeah, we know he's a heroin addict. How is he? And he looked right at us, and he said, I'm sorry, but your son didn't make it. Instantly, my next thought was, and I'll ask people, what was my next thought? And people say, man, you wanted to go get high. No, my next thought was I'll be at the 6 o'clock 12-step meeting that night. And that's what I did. But I had to go in and, see my son laying there dead. And, I was part of this. I helped kill my own son, and I will be responsible for that because I wasn't a father. I led Nick down a road, and I didn't start him on heroin, but he did it because I was doing it, and we ultimately did it together. But he knew what to do, but he chose not to and thought he was invincible. And then I had to walk in and tell Shannon, yeah, he's gone. Hardest day of my life, but I went to a 6 o'clock meeting that night, and I never looked back. And since my son has passed away, he passed away August 1st of 2014, I have attended 104 funerals.
Wow.
104. Jesus. And it gets crazier than that. So When my son Nick died, it was on a Friday, and the Chicago Sun-Times was running a big article on me on Saturday because the next Thursday night I was doing a big Narcan training event. And the news reporter called me and said, Tim, we're going to cancel the story. I'm sorry to hear about your son. And I said, no, you're not. She said, what are you talking about? I said, look, if my son's friends would have had Narcan, chances are he could be alive. I said, I'm burying my son and having his service Wednesday night at the church, and Thursday night we're going on with the training. So there was a big article in the paper, anti-heroin crusader loses his son to overdose. And unfortunately, through my son's passing, that is what solidified me in what I do today. Nick's best friend, Adam, who unfortunately I offered heroin the first time at 17, and he had been in treatment while I was in prison, and he relapsed and had just got out of treatment, was in a sober home. He ended up moving in with me and my 16-year-old son, Tanner. And Adam went to meetings every day and got a sponsor and met his sponsor at 6:30 a.m. for 6 months. And I remember his sponsor, Ray, saying, all right, meet me at noon tomorrow. And Adam goes, no, we meet at 6 in the morning. And Ray goes, no. We did that for 6 months. I just wanted to see if you were willing to go to any length to stay sober. I'm sick of meeting you at 6 a.m. We'll meet at lunch and you're buying. So, and Adam met a girl, Liz, at the Starbucks. So they're living in my basement. And my girlfriend, who became my fiance, Kirsten's living with me. And, things are going well. And Kirsten all of a sudden pops on me, yeah, I'm pregnant. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not mine. Yes, it is. So here at 46 years old, now I'm going to have another child.
Dude.
I had just lost one, but it turned out to be a blessing because now I've got little Mackenzie, who's almost 19 months old. I've had this gorgeous angel that I get to wake up. I change her diapers. I do everything, and it's the first time I've had a child clean and sober. So God called one of my children home and blessed me with another. And these are the things that I cherish in my life today. But the story I've had a lot of pain in recovery. So Adam, at 10 months sober, I sent him and his girlfriend down to work for the treatment center, Banyan Treatment Center, who I was the chief marketing officer for at the time. And they became behavioral health techs. And Suzette, who used to run the support groups with me, who had a private practice, I convinced to opening a treatment center in downtown Naperville through Banyan. So we started opening Banyan, Chicago, and we brought Adam and Liz back to do our admissions. And 2 weeks into being open, Adam called in sick. So we're in the office, and they lived right across the street, right from my office. I could see them out their house out the window. And Liz says, well, I'm going to go home for lunch and check on Adam. 5 minutes later, one of our therapists runs in and says, get across the street, Adam's overdosed. I said, quit joking around. She said, Tim, I'm serious. We hightailed it over there. I ran in, and there's one of my second kids dead with a needle in his arm.
Jesus.
Hit him with Narcan 8-10 times, CPR, but he had been dead about 2 hours. My son wasn't a shock. Adam was. He was 17 and a half months clean and sober. I found out after the fact his girlfriend had caught him huffing about a month prior, and I'm like, why didn't he tell me? And her exact words were, he didn't want to let you down, Tim. He didn't want to lose his job, but he didn't want to hurt you, that he slipped up. And I'm like, I would have got him help. I wouldn't have been mad. It's a disease. It's addiction. So he died, and a week prior to that, my daughter Mackenzie was 4 months old, and my fiance Kirsten suffered severely from postpartum depression, and she attempted suicide. So I had her shipped down to a treatment center in Florida for mental health. She flew back for Adam's funeral back to Florida, came back December 23rd. December 25th, we had a blowout, orders of protection. It turns out she was still in a full psychotic break, and it wasn't the postpartum. She was undiagnosed bipolar for 20 years.
Jesus.
So we had to get her stable. So these are just some of the things that have happened to me in recovery. But you know what? The most important thing is I still work a program. I ask God what he's trying to teach me every day. In my son passing, I've assisted 39 of his friends or acquaintances into treatment. I've probably assisted over 2,500 people into treatment in the past 3 years. 95% having no insurance or state insurance. I get to speak all over the country. I started the second program in the country where addicts can walk into a police station and ask for help. In a year and a half in Dixon, Illinois, we've put over 160 people into treatment. I've started it in 12 other police stations. And, that takes me to where I am today. I recently left Banyan Treatment Center a little after 2 years. I was putting in too many hours, so I went to a smaller place called the Recovery Team, which is a 40-bed small place in Florida in Haven Detox, and it gives me time to focus on Man in Recovery Foundation, which is a not-for-profit, and we have no employees. All the money I get paid for my speaking events, I put all of it in the foundation. I give every dollar away. Last year I gave away, I got paid $85,000, so I gave away all that $85,000, and on top of that, we probably pulled in another $30,000. And we put 60-some people into treatment. I paid for 40 people to get into sober homes. This year we paid for 24 people into treatment and about 22 to get into sober homes. So my life today is about giving back. I don't want any family to go through what Shannon went through. Heroin took me, her husband, her beautiful house, and her firstborn child. I wouldn't wish addiction on anyone. What my fiance Kirsten has struggled with, it even gets crazier with her because she was sober the whole time. And then I found out 2 months ago she had been abusing her gabapentin, had an order of protection. She was going to go commit suicide and drank and relapsed after 3.5 years and was going to eat all her lithium. And we were able to get the police involved into detox, and she was taking 32,000 milligrams of gabapentin a day. She was taking 40 to 50 pills when she was supposed to be taking 3.
Jesus.
So because what had happened about 6 months ago, I guess we got in a dispute, so she took a few more, and they made her feel good, and then it just took off. The addiction kicked in, and now this sober alcoholic has become a drug addict dependent on her psych meds. So, we got her weaned off, new sponsor, new therapist, back on the proper meds, and things are well. But we take it day by day, and she's got to work her program. I have to work mine. I can't rescue her. And that's outside of everything else I do, But the thing I did, I started penning my book when I was in prison, and I had a dear friend of mine, Scott Carbonara, and his wife, Jocelyn, helped me put it all together. And, we released a book, From Dope to Hope, A Man in Recovery. And it's a quick read. You could do it in 6 hours. It's about 200 pages, but it is a very, very powerful story on everything I just shared. But don't tell me that you can't turn your life around. If you've got a heartbeat, damn it, you have hope. And I've done over 1,000 interventions in the past 2 years, and I've had 3 people not go to treatment. 3. I have no training. I don't have any clinical background. I lived an addict for my whole life. I was a very successful entrepreneur. But what I have the gift of is sitting down and sharing and finding that little hole and going in and opening it and getting that person to break down and say, all right, I need some help. All right, cool, let's go. And I have it all set up prior to walking in because I know 9 out of 10 times I'm walking out of that house with that person. And a majority of them have no insurance, and I'll backdoor them into a detox. And then I work with 2 places in South Carolina, one called the Owl's Nest and one called Salvation Oaks, which are 4-month programs. I can get somebody in for $1,400. So in a nutshell, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now you want to read the book.
Now I got to read the book.
I'm telling you. And I'm not unique. I'll end with this. So the day Nick died, Shannon, my former wife, is going, I hate God. I'm mad at God. He didn't answer my prayers. And I looked at her and I said, Shannon, what I'm going to say is going to sting, but you need to listen to me. I said, maybe God did answer our prayers. It's just not the answer we're looking for. And about 2 weeks later, we had lunch, and she said, Tim, it's really resonated with me what you said. And she said, I put a lot of thought into it. And she said, I truly believe God put Nick and I in your life for a reason, and had you go through all your struggles, had Nick go through his, for him to pass on to set the stage for what you're going to do next. She said, I want you to go forward with your foundation. I want you to keep helping people because you've got a gift that nobody else has, and don't let our son die in vain. And that's what I do every day. I wear a cross around my neck with my son's ashes in it. And Nick and Adam guide and direct me every day with what I do.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Dude, you fucked me up. Wow, this has got to be, and I've done over 100 interviews, and I have had probably 2 really, really heavy, and this is number 3 of some of the heaviest stuff you'd want to even imagine in somebody's life, and how powerful the disease is. It is so powerful, so cunning, and as you're going along in your story, it's just another. It's just the only one answer. It's a miracle that you're alive and your life has absolute purpose.
One of the greatest books I read was A Purpose-Driven Life in Prison. And you know what? Everybody has a purpose and a calling. And I got a wonderful one today. I love you, honey. I just gave my beautiful fiance a kiss. She's been trying to be quiet. But, I have a calling. And if you would ask me, 4 years ago, still in prison, would I? And not in a million years, and I've had some cool things happen. I was at the State of the Union address. I've did the Steve Harvey show with Dr. Drew, and Dr. Drew's a friend of mine now. I helped Lisa Ling with CNN. I've been filming with a major cable network for the past year, and we're very close to greenlighting my unscripted reality-based TV show. I've been on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, Newsweek magazine. I'm going on The View in a month. And I could care less about all that. But what it does is it gives me the platform to drop the damn stigma and let people know there's hope. I did a TEDx talk in Naperville last year, and people can go to YouTube and type in Tim Ryan TEDx Naperville. And my 18-minute talk was on the denial of the disease of addiction, whether it's opiates, and I was geared more towards opiate, but don't forget I am an alcoholic first and foremost, but that there's so many people, there's 23.5 million people in long-term recovery, but too many people hide in the rooms. I need doctors, lawyers, judges, painters, plumbers coming out and saying, hey, my name's John Smith and I'm 4 years sober, and be proud to do it and drop it. That's just kind of my story. And I've got a gift. I love commanding an audience. One of my programs I do is called The Cop and the Convict. So I go into high schools and speak in the day, and I do a community forum at night with a detective partner of mine. But what we do is I share, but then we educate about cell phone monitoring software, computer monitoring software, why to drug test, how to drug test. And I will stay there for 10 hours afterwards if I have to answer every question with the family on how to get help, what to do. I'm basically the concierge of the treatment industry. I just guide and direct people to the right resources. and it keeps me friggin' grounded, and I love my life today. I get to leave you in a few minutes and go run my support group tonight. And I'm on the road tomorrow, driving 7 hours to Ohio. Then I got to go to West Virginia and pick up a good friend of mine, Brandon Novak, who was in all the Jackass movies and Viva La Bam, and former pro skateboarder who's 2 years sober. We got a huge event there. I drive back Monday. I'm speaking to the Illinois Sheriff's Association for 3 hours. I'm the keynote. Back to Chicago, pick Novak up at the airport, and then we've got 10 high schools and 2 community forums we're doing. That's just the next 5 days of my life.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah. And I love it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, man, just the level of intensity that is your life, and it always has been, one of the reasons why, you jumped so gung-ho into the drugs and the alcohols, because that's how you're geared. That's just how you're built. You're built for speed, and as soon as it hits your veins, you're off and running. And there's no difference now than as you go in this recovery journey. It's the same thing. Instead of hitting heroin, you're hitting recovery.
I do this, and one thing I left out, I do have an addictive personality. So in one of my bits of sobriety, and I think it was 2000, I went down to Skydive Chicago, and I did my first tandem skydive. And in 6 months, I'd done 250 skydives. So yeah, I'm right now. I've got a little over 500 jumps, but I am definitely an adrenaline junkie. But I cherish this gift of life every day. I cherish that I get to come home to a fiance. that gets to take care of herself, spend the day with our daughter, go to her meetings, do what she needs to do, supports me in everything I do. I got my 15-year-old lazy lab next to me that I couldn't wait to get out of prison and see my dog. I am grateful for the little things today. A roof over my head, clothes on the back, food on the table, and a wonderful fellowship. I attend a program that starts with an A and ends with an A, and it has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. But believe me, I try to stay as humble as I can, and God is using me as a vessel to carry the message of hope.
No question about it. Absolutely no question about it. Just an amazing, beautiful story. It's heartbreaking, but at the same time, you cannot deny God working in your life. So many God shots and getting to you where you're at today, because you're the man who can carry the message. No question about it.
Amen. And blessed and truly honored to be come on your show here. And if people, they can go to Amazon, type in From Dope to Hope. They can go to my foundation website if they want to learn more about that, www.amirfasandfrank.org. And if you want me to come out and speak, you can go to booktimryan.com.
Absolutely.
Not a bad deal.
No. Okay, so you know what? A little of that cut out, but it's very important. Very important that people be able to reach out to you. So tell us again, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you, and give us the title of the book again.
The book is From Dope to Hope, A Man in Recovery. The best way to reach me is via my website, www.amirfasandfrank.org. AMIRF, A Man in Recovery Foundation.org.
Beautiful. Folks, I'm going to have that on the show notes so you can easily get a hold of Tim. And Tim, it's time to close down. You ready?
I'm blessed, buddy. Let's rock and close this. And thank you all for having me on.
Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to ask you 5 questions about your early recovery, and I want you to respond with insightful answers that you can share with our newcomers. Let's rock and roll.
You got it. Yep.
So number 1, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
I didn't surrender. I always had the thought in my mind that I went to meetings for the wrong reasons, to get someone off my back, my wife, my mom, my dad, whoever, but I always thought in the back of mind, I'll get clean and then I can go drink like a normal person. I truly wasn't ready to surrender, but I never worked the damn steps.
Yes.
Those promises will come true.
Yes, but you have to work the steps.
I was afraid to. I want to do it, Searching and Fearless Moral Inventory. So get a sponsor and work the damn steps.
Beautiful. All right. At one point, did you have that spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
Unfortunately, people don't have to do it the way I did, but it was in Stateville Correctional Center, locked in H House in that cell, facing, a year and a half, and you're going to be doing a year and a half in prison. And that's when I truly surrendered, and what I try to instill in people today. And I'm telling you, as soon as I did that, it's not like a white light came down, but I had this feeling like I'm going to be okay. And then the God moment started happening. Even in prison, in a bad environment, they happened, and they happened tenfold. That's where it happened for me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, here's a question. I'm going to deviate a little bit from what I normally ask, because you're a serial entrepreneur. You've been super successful over these years. The drugs were just the catalyst for you to implode and destroy every one of your businesses.
Yep.
But there's something inside of you, and there's something inherently that all right, that have allowed you to be successful or make these businesses successful. What are the keys of success that you would say to somebody who's new in recovery, who's listening to this, who one day would like to open up his own business? What are the keys to success?
Shut up and listen, and hang around with people that are smarter than you. Whether it's in the program or it's in the business world, you have to have mentors. You have to have people you can learn from. And I would get surrounded with the best of the best, constantly ask questions, but I listened, I took notes, and I would formulate a way then how I could go do it for myself. But I didn't surround myself then with people to guide and direct me. So you always need mentors, but it's like when I set up my foundation, I got some very key people in long-term recovery, lawyers, ex-football player, professional actors that can keep me as a buffer to keep me in check. So you need mentors, but you need someone to keep you in check constantly.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Very practical, and it's very similar to one of Jim Rohn's famous quotes. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with.
Bam. And it's as simple as that. I'll use my walking meeting I do Sunday mornings. One guy was 38 years sober. He passed away. Another guy's 25. Another guy's 21. Those are the people I hang out with.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, Tim, one final question. If you could give our newcomers only one suggestion, what would that be?
Never give up. Never give up, and don't give up on yourself. Give this a shot. The simple thing, do not leave before the miracle happens. And this is a journey. It's not a race. Enjoy the friggin' ride. You do not have to live the way you've been living anymore.
Absolutely fantastic. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been one of the best interviews I've ever had. And thank you so much for having me on. I'm truly humbled and I'm truly blessed, my friend.
You and me both, brother. You and me both.
Good stuff.
All right, folks, we have now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the SHAIR Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.theshairpodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then.